Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
You would expect on a program like this that we would discuss the cost and the empirical impact of an issue like homelessness on the broader population and what might be done to redeem that growing problem. And of course we will, but other questions arise. Maybe more importantly, what are those who are homeless? What are they like? How do they feel about access to care? And what would a homeless person like to see that is not currently offered for as a hand up? Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. Happy holidays. I'm Chris William. Thank you for supporting this broadcast. On this edition, not just experts on homelessness, but an expert in being homeless. We will meet our panel and start the dialogue in just a moment.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Bob Thompson of the North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness, Deb Richardson Moore of the Triune Mercy Center, Matt Kennel from the City Center Partnership of Columbia, South Carolina, and Arthur Abraham Abrams with the Running Works program. Now, here's Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. I know a lot of the dialogue always happens like right before the cameras come on and we all get passionate about it. Welcome all. Abraham, I'm going to take just a second with you because while you were introduced on the opening of the program, I want to make sure that we understand where you have come from and where you live. And I'm going to talk about you in the third person, so please forgive me for that until I get through the discussion here. So Abraham was born into the system, abandoned by his parents at birth. He grew up being shuffled from government agency to group home, things like DSS foster care, back again. You have moved from New York to Georgia to North Carolina, living the homeless life most of the time. About 6 months ago, you landed in Charlotte and have been a part of an organization called Running Works, and we'll talk to you a little bit about that in a moment. We saw Meredith before the show. And just recently, you've secured subsidized housing for 1 year while you get back on your feet and look for employment. But Abraham, I guess it's safe to say that you've been homeless most of your life?
Yeah, well, most of my life as far as in the system, from I was a baby, how the system works. And I would say the most thing about homelessness that people don't understand, that homelessness is not a disease. You know, anybody could become homeless. You know, you could be rich one day and fall the next. And I think the majority of people need to learn how to care. You know, to me, love and unity is the key to all of this. If you care about a person, whether you go to church, whether you're just a businessman, a businesswoman, it's about caring about people. And I learned that from a child, because if people didn't care about me, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at, because I would have gotten to bad things, drugs, alcohol, which I didn't do in my life. So here I am.
Yeah. I want to expand on some of that as we go through this dialogue, Abraham, and come back to some of these issues. So, Deb, you've been in and around the issue for a while of being homeless, and I don't mean to marginalize it by saying it's an issue, but for the sake of dialogue here, I mean, you've heard Abraham talk about what might be misunderstood. I'll ask you the question. What do you think is misunderstood about the homeless issue and population?
I would agree with him. I think the biggest thing that our section of the Carolinas doesn't realize is how much mental illness and how much mental disability is involved and low IQ, like that 75 to 85. So many people think it is drugs or alcohol, and there is plenty of that. We see a lot of that, and we sort of started with drug rehab. But there's just a lot of issues out there that I think people would care more, would be more worried about if they really knew.
Professor Thompson, same question. What do you think is misunderstood?
Well, following up on that, virtually anyone can be homeless at some point. It really just takes some kind of catastrophic event for many people, or problems such as mental illness or substance abuse. But it's really surprising how many of those individuals who end up in our shelters and our system have attended college. They're not, they're women with children who've gone through a divorce and they don't have funding. It's a real cosmopolitan group in terms of the diversity. About a quarter of the people who go through foster care end up being homeless. A large number of our veterans end up being homeless. About 25% of the people who are homeless in the country are veterans, almost 160,000 this past year. So it's a wide range of people. It's not just the people that you sometimes see on the streets. You know, a lot of them are working. A lot of them are working to try to get out of that situation, and they may be holding down 1 and 2 jobs. So people tend to, I think, sometimes put them over on the side, when in many respects they're representative of the whole population. They had a particular set of events where they lacked the support of family or the community to help them in that situation, and then they tumbled into a situation.
You know, and Matt, I want to bring you into this because, you know, here we are, and again, not to talk about Abraham in the third person or being homeless in the third person, but we balance the personal story of being homeless, or Bob, as you say, everyone could be homeless and is close to being homeless, which I believe. But but the city of Columbia has particularly had a homeless issue, has homeless challenge in the downtown area. So we've got a policy issue of being homeless, and then you've got the personal issue of being homeless. How does Columbia challenge this? How do they tackle this, and how is it working, or how isn't it working?
Well, Chris, we've been chipping away at it for a long time. You know, we are the state capital of a poor state, a historically poor state. And, you know, because of that, we have had a significant homeless population and problem, if you will. But what we've realized, I guess, over the years, and we're really getting some traction in the past few years, is it's really collaboration. You know, there's so many groups that have something to offer. I'm on the board of Transitions, which is a comprehensive long-term facility to transition people out of homelessness. But there's also the United Way and all of its resources, the gospel missions, the rescue missions, the mental health groups, the police, the social services, and I think working together, we try to move people now through a complicated or comprehensive system to where they can get help and get into housing. Or to get and even soft skills like what the running program does, you know, to help people develop habits that can get them out of homelessness. So it's all very complicated, but you just have to keep chipping away at it and working together. You
know, and I know we've made a reference a couple times, Abraham, about the Running Works program that you're wearing here. Running Works has helped you do what?
Well, Running Works is a program. It's like, okay, say for instance, if I wanted to be in broadcasting. Right? Most people I come across, they say, well, it's a competitive field. But Running Works would tell you, well, we're going to give you the skills to get in the competition. That's the difference than somebody telling you, you know, taking your self-esteem and bringing it down. You have to think about it, say, okay, this is hard to do. But Running Works is hands-on. You know, they believe in everybody that comes in there.
So, Abraham, Deb kind of listed a few things that caused homelessness. From some of your friends and some of the contemporaries, from as many years as you've spent in the system, what do you think causes homelessness?
Well, first of all, you got to start with yourself. Me, myself, I would say what causes homelessness is that sometimes you may have a job that can't pay the rent. okay? Because nowadays they're tearing down buildings, building them back up, but then the rent is so high that you can't pay, like in New York City, for instance. There's people that's on the street and they don't have anything, but they don't want to go get help because they don't trust the system. So that's why you see them on the street, because I mean, I've talked to a lot of homeless people in New York. I've been like, why are you here? There's help right here, but they don't want to go in there because either they feel like they're being controlled or, you know, certain things just don't add up. So the majority of people that are homeless is probably because of the fact that they want help, but they don't trust the system.
Yeah, so Deb, you know, and Bob and Matt, please jump in here. So I guess the question is, we've got programs in places like Columbia and Greenville and Charlotte and Raleigh and down where you are in Greenville, North Carolina, Bob. But how, you know, what are we missing here? What's the responsibility of a community for a homeless person besides ignoring them, as we all have done when we walk by them on a bench downtown? I mean, what should we be doing? And people will say, and Abraham, you can talk about this if you want. You know, I've tried to help homeless people, but all they want to do is take money, and I think they're going to go drink it away or use it for drugs.
And that may be. But I think as Abraham sort of illustrates, to me, if you are homeless, what you've probably lost is all your relationships. Because there are some of us who could make bad decisions and everything, but we're still going to have our families around us or friends to take us in. And our definition of homelessness is really someone who has lost all of that. And so what we do is a lot of counterintuitive stuff, like running, which I find is just wonderful. But so we're doing, you know, with housing and social work and mental health, but we're also doing art and music and improv theater and gardening and trying to instill in people friendships and encouragement, and that they come in and volunteer with us because this is their church. And so every way that we can think of, we are trying to say, you are worthy, you are worth us going to this trouble for, you're worth us making a beautiful church for, and we are your family if you want us to be. And so and trying in every way we can think of to raise them up, remind them who they used to be. And that's what and just like that Meredith and Abraham said, once you prove to yourself you can run, you can garden, you can paint, you can do those things, then you are more likely to go after the housing. And
So let me ask this question, both of you, and then I'll come back and have you answer this. So is the homeless problem more about a policy and putting money toward it, or a mental health issue, or is it about the person who is in homeless and helping them find their way back to where they feel good about themselves?
I'm not sure the ors belong in there.
both and.
It's a multi-dimensional issue. In North Carolina, we've been taking the approach that getting people into housing is the first step. It helps play with work with the sense of self-respect and self-worth and the connections. And we also find that it saves money. If you're able to get people into housing, they're then in a position to build the connections with the local community, to build the relationships with the church, to build relationships with physicians. Urban Ministries here in Charlotte, where we're filming, has a great success story in terms of it. One of its programs, dealing with 85 people, by getting people into housing, saved over almost $2 million a year in medical costs. So you're able to cut back on police visits, medical costs, emergency room visits, by getting people into housing and building that support network around them so that they can do the different kinds of things and get jobs.
And that's key, though. You can't just put somebody in housing
not just
and
housing.
leave them.
The support network has to be there.
It never works.
It's like the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. Okay, I love that movie.
Yeah,
Me too.
It's like you see a person, like you said, some people just walk past them. You don't know who they are, what they did previously in their life, why they're there. But I think the big picture is, once you put something together, like you say, it's homeless, okay? But you may have a home, okay? But you may have less than the person that has another home. It's like, okay, when you get your housing, biggest problem is that you can't pay the security deposit. You got to pay a security deposit for electric. You know, all these things work together. So when you get all that in your mind, you're saying, well, I can't do this. Then your self-esteem goes down. So if you don't have people in place to say, okay, we're going to be there for you to help you. We're not going to hold your hand, but we're going to help you get to that next step. Once you have it, you have to know how to hold on to it.
So you just secured subsidized housing. How much of a boost to your, not just self-esteem, Abraham, but how much of that boost to your world did that help?
It's my everything, because my grandchild, for instance, I didn't tell my grandchildren that I was homeless. So I finally told them that I was homeless, and my 10-year-old grandchild said, are you okay? And I said, yeah. And he texts me, he goes, well, Grandpa, I can read and I can listen. And he said, I love you, Grandpa. And so that helped me to understand that he doesn't really know what homelessness is, but he cares. You know, and once you have that caring spirit, it'll go a long way.
I think what you clearly can't do, Chris, is ignore it. And that's something that I think that's one of the lessons we learned in Columbia. I think for years we could have been accused as a community of sort of putting it aside, you know, and there were some Christian-based ministries dealing with it, but I don't think the whole community was dealing with it. And
So did business ignore it? Did city council ignore it?
I think all of the above.
Yeah.
But I think business and council have sort of come together, particularly over the last 3 to 5 years, with a lot of help from the United Way as a convener, and that has changed things in Columbia, and I think some real progress is being made now.
And let me go back to something, Bob, that you said, and Deb, that you had said originally, and that is, and Abraham, you're here in Charlotte. So in Charlotte, they award about 400 vouchers a year for housing for homeless, but 32,000 families applied for 400. That seems insurmountable. And that's one city in one part of North Carolina or South Carolina. So, I mean, this seems like this problem would be huge. Is it huge?
Yeah, I think
Is it that big?
I think it is. In Greenville, we have only just in the past few months begun all the homeless service providers to meet to decide what, as a community, we need to be doing. And certainly just some of the affordable housing is part of that. And in different things, some for families, some for maybe singles, just like I say, both and. The other thing is public transportation, so that when you do get a job, you're able to get there. And then the third thing is on the top of our list anyway, is mental health services.
It's like Running Works, you know. I feel that they're like one of the best programs. I mean, not along with being therapeutic as far as running. If anybody knows about exercise, most people don't want to get up in the morning and do anything, you know. But when you put in your mind, all right, I can go running, and you can do that every day, and you have stuff in place, like we said, if you need transportation, okay, you know, you might not have the money, but at the same time, you know, there's a bus pass system. You know, you're responsible. Running Works makes you a responsible individual because it's like, you know, they care. Everybody if we're sitting here at the table right now having a life skills lesson, everybody there can bring something to the table.
So it's not so much about running as it is about just showing care and reaching out. Is that right, Abraham?
Well, it's more like it's like when you exercise, you know, you get excitement out of it, you know, and it's like when you see people making it, it's good.
So when you're out, and Matt, you talked about having to kind of change the dialogue in Columbia. And Bob, you're at the point of the North Carolina Coalition of Homelessness.
That's very much our mission.
Right. So how do you find, I mean, you all sound like heroes for homelessness, but politically, are there heroes for homelessness? Are there public policy folks that understand how really hard this is and are willing to go to the mat for it?
There are. Over the past 12, 14 years, the U.S. the United States Interinstitutional Commission on Chronic Homelessness has been a focal point for this, and it's played a major role in a way that it never did before, both under the Bush administration and under the Obama administration, of trying to start these dialogues. There is a national plan It's focused very much on dealing with chronic homelessness and families and veterans. That dialogue there have been hundreds of 10-year plans adopted across the country. They've been followed up by the U.S. Council of Mayors, which has been very influential in this effort as well. So there's a lot of people perceiving this as a major issue for the cities and trying to marshal the resources necessary to deal with it.
Go ahead, Abraham. Were you going to say something?
Just to elaborate what he's saying, I think the reason they're doing that is because, like for instance, Charlotte, for instance, I came here 15 years ago before they had all these big buildings. And I think the reason that they're actually having dialogue now is because businesses are coming in, you know, and I've heard recently that they're going to get rid of the benches, so they don't want to see the homeless people on the benches.
This is downtown.
Right. But I feel like, you know, we know what's here. You know, there's really no dialogue need to be spoken on. Like Running Works, if she sat there and dialogued about it, it would have never happened. You know, once the thought, the idea gets there, because we know homelessness exists. So it's like getting together. It's like Jesus. You know, it's the red letters. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, in that King James version, right? Well, let me ask you this: do you have? Are there heroes in the State House? Can you get someone to stand up?
I don't know if they're heroes in the State House. I mean, there are heroes in the State House, but maybe not for homelessness. And but at the local level, you know, we have had some city council members and our mayor that have stood up. And some things they've floated have been sort of controversial, and other things have been practical. But I think the fact that they're engaged and not ignoring it and trying to make things better is positive. And I don't think we saw that 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. So I think there are heroes, and I think there's a growing understanding that you have to work on it, and things can happen.
Can I jump off on that?
Please.
Because I think the only way that's going to happen is if the rich and poor get together and start and become friends with Abraham. And so when we started at Triune, we started with about 30 or 40 homeless people in the sanctuary, and I thought that was what we were going to be, just a church by and with homeless. And then, much to my surprise, the rest of Greenville began coming in. So right now, our worship.
Why do you think that happened?
Well, what they told me was, I think this is what the kingdom of God looks like. So on any given Sunday morning, we may have a quarter of the folks in there literally living on the street, a quarter working poor, but half middle class and wealthy. And they worship together. They then go eat lunch together. Many of them go to different kinds of things, and that's where I think the difference is going to be made when you're building relationships.
Yeah, so Bob, in the coalition, well, wait a minute, because we literally have 2 minutes left. Does the faith-based community do enough now, not to indict them, because they've done a lot, but do they do enough to congeal that effort?
There's always more that can be done, and I'm going to have to pass on that because we work mainly with the coalitions to end homelessness, not any particular agency. In North Carolina, the best groups in terms of heroes have actually been many of the communities. Asheville, Winston-Salem are paragons and of building local coalitions, working with mayors, city managers, and county commissioners, as well as faith-based groups, members of the United Way, to pull these things together. So I can't really answer the faith-based piece, but
I can answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Em.
Well, most of the churches have a lot of soup kitchens, okay? But I always feel if you have a job, you can feed yourself. So that way we can narrow down the soup kitchens, where you can have your soup kitchen in your own home.
And I think the faith-based community does a great job, but we do have to work together and to try to get everybody on the same page and doing the things that need to be done is a challenge. But we continue to work on that.
So in about 20 seconds left, Matt, and I'll give you the final word here. Do you feel like we're reaching a tipping point about homelessness?
Yes, I think it's. I feel much better about where we are now than we did a decade ago, and I think progress is being made.
Yeah. Okay, gentlemen, lady, thank you for being on our program. Abraham, I hope you have more time to spend with your family over the holidays. That'd be kind of cool.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you for being here, Bob. Thanks for making the trip all the way from Greenville, North Carolina, because there is no easy way to get from Greenville to the rest of the state. Matt, good to see you. Deb, thanks for being here too.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy holidays. Until next week. I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.